Hey everyone, this was a great episode of Survivor, actually. Survivor 42, episodes, I guess, 6 and 7. It was a double 2-hour episode, which, by the way, is totally the way to do this. Especially, I mean, they should do it every merge episode at least, but especially if you're going to do this dang twist, don't do a freaking cliffhanger like you did last time. Oh, God. That was awful. But, yeah, so they did bring back the hourglass twist. And I remember hearing Rob has a podcast talking about this, and I was thinking this as well. I was like, there's no way they've been modifying things all over. There's no way they're going to bring back actually, like, taking a challenge win away from somebody. Because it was so controversial, and even the Survivor 41 cast was so opposed to it, because it felt like it's not just a twist. It's like undoing everything you know about Survivor. Like, you can't even take Jeff at face value anymore. But they did modify it in a much better. I mean, much better. I still wouldn't want the twist anywhere near Survivor again, but that's besides the point. I do think they improved on it here for sure, and that was like verifiable. You could see the fact they knew ahead of time that they would have a game-changing power of some sort. You even saw, I think Drea was the first one to bring it up, but I don't know if everybody else would have come to that conclusion or not. But it was already something they kind of came up with on their own, is that could be a possibility. They would only that it could be reversed potentially. She had that idea just from that alone. So just give them at least a little bit, at least inform them that there is a game-changing power, like, so it's not just exile, that kind of thing. And then people will do the footwork themselves. They'll start speculating from there. So they released accounting for that from the beginning. Very interesting episode throughout. A lot of back and forth strategizing all over. So things were getting mixed around this way and that way. The dynamics coming into the merge immediately were super interesting. By the way, when they divided the tribes up, I was immediately like, when they divided the teams up for the challenge, it was immediately like, well, whoever's with Jonathan is going to win, right? But again, the win, it doesn't really matter in this circumstance. Well, it wins, and you win reward. You get Applebee's, by the way, which is one of the factors that Jeff named that they're changing. They changed 3 factors going into this season as opposed to last season. And the first factor was Applebee's, first variable, actually, which is interesting. Yeah. I do like crunchy onion rings from Applebee's, so good on them for that. So they had that element. There was also the element that he would tell them ahead of time that they would have some sort of game-changing power, the one being exiled. And then the third thing was that any of the winning team could opt to switch in for that one person being exiled if they wanted to seize that power themselves, Which would have been interesting, I guess, but I don't blame any of them for not stepping into that spot. Especially Jonathan, who needed that food. He needs a lot of sustenance there. And speaking of Jonathan, I was terrified, and I would have been heartbroken if Jonathan had been voted out here in this spot, not even make the jury, after like how much buildup we have. That's kind of where I was leaning. When it was first between Jonathan and Marianne, I was trying to think, who is the least long-term edit here? But they both have been edited pretty regularly, like they're pretty present on the show. But then when you bring in the element of Lydia being a possibility, Lydia has not made an impact on the show very much. She has had a very minor role there. And so I guess it did kind of spell it out there that she would be a sufficient sacrifice at the merge, because they did not edit her to be a long-term threat. But still very interesting how we got there. And the fact that Hai didn't get his way. I thought for sure, like, as soon as Hai got tipped off that Lydia was who they were looking at now, I thought, for sure, Hai's always getting his way. Like, it doesn't seem like it's going any other way. But no, Lydia ends up being the vote, and Hai does end up voting for Lydia. So Hai doesn't get his way, but he also wasn't blindsided or on the outs here, so he's still stuck with the 8, which is 7 now, I guess. But so he's stuck with them. He just didn't get his ultimate way, or obviously he would have preferred Lydia to stay. But I mean, he wanted Lydia to stay, probably not over someone like Jonathan. He probably would have had Marianne if it was his way, because he did say he wanted to have Jonathan as a shield and as a physical guy. Because then once you take Jonathan out, Hai's one of the more physical guys, right? Like Jonathan's so far out in the front, so he doesn't want to set that precedent for sure. But it was interesting. This was really Omar's breakout episode for sure. Like, you saw a little bit of him in the pre-merge doing stuff, but not too much. And he was not such a force. And he was such a force that he went up against Hai, who had been such a force in the pre-merge. He went up against Hai as like a strategic counterpart and actually got his way. And this was after him even saying, like, I don't have a vote, so I'm not really, don't really want to push the issue, because I don't want to give up my spot in the game, or like, I forget what he said exactly, but he basically said, like, I'm not going to force my hand on this one, but he ended up literally actually doing that and maneuvering it to be how he wanted it to go. And good on him, because he literally was like, I want to keep my tribe intact still, and we could still work together, Jonathan, Marianne, and Omar, and Lindsay. And he did just that. So Jonathan and Marianne were options, and he kind of sidelined that, especially when Lydia presented that option, and when Lydia basically was willing to go back on the 8 that quickly. She was like, yeah, I'm willing to go Jonathan. As soon as Omar talked to her, took her aside after that. And so that was obviously Lydia's huge blunder. I mean, it was that quick where she was like, yeah, I'll vote Jonathan. I'm convinced. What it's like, we have a solid thing going. So immediately he's setting the precedent. If you break from the 8, that's what's gonna happen to you. You're out of here. And he got his way on that. So that was really, really good from Omar. I love we have a lot of power players going into this game after the merge. It'll be fun to watch. Also really fun to watch was Jonathan and Mike's like bromance, and now that bond formed so instantly and so rapidly that like Romeo was even getting annoyed by it. They were like sleeping together, going to see the sunrise together, all these things, and that was so quickly. I mean, man, relationships move fast on Survivor. But I love there was a lot of bonding going on. There was a little bond between Hai and Romeo about being LGBT, but even that didn't seem to hold that much water because Romeo wasn't even brought in the loop on this big alliance. So the big alliance consisted of Drea, Hai, Lydia, Mike, Lindsay, Jonathan, and Omar. And then when Roxroy was exiled during this time, but Drea looped him in on the alliance as well, so that made an 8-person alliance. You had the connection between Drea and Roxroy. You had Lindsay, Jonathan, and Omar as a 3, and you had Hai, Lydia, and Mike as a 3 coming together like that. So it almost seems weird that like Drea wouldn't want to clue Romeo in on that, and then it would be 3-3-3. Could have had something going there for sure. Whereas now it's like you're in the minority in this tribe. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I mean, we also had some fun talk between the different people who had shared advantages. Mike and Marianne had a little idle talk as they both said the phrases. Drea, Lindsay, and Hai all talk about their amulet power, which like I always keep forgetting about it, and it comes up again. So it's interesting they're all in that big alliance together, but they've decided to work together on it. But obviously they're all going to be cautious about it. Hai's like wondering who's going to take that first move. It's an interesting dynamic to put in place where it's a tentative alliance, but there's tension there behind the scenes. And once Hai told Omar that Chanel had lost her vote, this is when the first time Omar had realized he would also have lost his vote then. So that's interesting. It was an interesting way for him to find that out. But even without a vote, he maneuvered this whole vote to happen. So that's great. Tori immediately was the target, though, and she was airing her whole tribe's dirty laundry. Roxroy was obviously fed up with her. That was probably a big part of why he even broke the hourglass to begin with. And then, of course, the miraculous Tori wins that immunity and kind of throws a wrench in their plans. And so that's made for a much more interesting episode, I think, because I imagine it probably would have just stuck on Tori, and that's just what it would have been. of course, there could have still been scrambling naturally from a merge boot, but this made for a much more interesting one from the beginning. But Tori was really like burying herself deeper. I think Mike was saying that she was like she's burying herself when she was like criticizing Rockroy's decision right after he came back, saying like he gave it as if they gave him that as a gift to get this power or whatever, and now he's using it against them. So she was really like sealing her fate there. I would have loved for her to go home then just because of that, but again, it did make for some spiciness for this episode that she did win. No, it's interesting. A lot of times this will happen where it's like the clear person who's going to be voted out wins immunity, and it's not just like, okay, next vote will get them, but especially in this new age of Survivor, it's like it's shifting so much so easily she could slip through the cracks and end up like final 5 or even later now. But it's also very possible they can band together and take her out, especially if this 7-person alliance now sticks together. I could definitely see that happening. But again, new age of Survivor alliances are a lot more tentative than they used to be, so I would be surprised, but I mean, maybe delightfully surprised if they actually stuck it out with this huge alliance, because that would be a nice change of pace in this new season of Survivor, where it's like we'll be an alliance for 1 week and then not the next, shifting all over kind of thing. Ultimately, though, the thing with the hourglass twist, and the reason why, even if you don't just look at it in principle, why I don't think it's a good twist, taking away a tribe win. You say they won, but they didn't actually win anything. Like, there was no certainty in that win whatsoever. Even if you take away the principle of that being bad in my eyes, I think it's a bad twist because they present it as an option, but it's not really an option. Like, Rockroy was the one person who might have considered not breaking the hourglass, and even he, as like an old school kind of player, could not find it in his heart to make that conscious decision when he had his alliance members on his side. It would give himself safety, and Tori was on the other side. It's like, that's not a choice, and there's not a single other person who would have made the opposite choice either. First of all, you're always going to default on the do the thing if it's in front of you, rather than leaving something alone, not breaking it. Second of all, you're giving that person with the hourglass safety if they choose to break it. So you're even more tempting them to break it. And then third of all, you were just outcasted from this group, which means like most likely, more often than not, that person's going to have more favor towards the other group than the group that just outcasted them. So it's like those are three big things weighing in the favor of you're going to break the hourglass every time, and everybody would have done it every time. And the fact that Jeff is presenting it as some really great dilemma, there's pros and cons. Yeah, there's pros and cons, but at the end of the day, you're giving them safety. That's the big thing that's going to guarantee that decision every time, Like, if you choose to not get safety and you being outcasted all this time leaves you out of alliances and you go back to camp and you got nothing waiting there for you, there's so much uncertainty in that, and you'd look like a fool if you went out after like just giving up an option at definite safety. So it's not as epic as Jeff seems to think it is, where it's like, oh, I turned back history, and Rockroy is a game changer now because he went back and turned back the hands of time and reversed the outcome of the challenge. What a game changer. No, it's not the challenge that they really thought it would, or the twist they really thought it would be. It's not special. They were being very awkward with Chanel because it was obviously between Tori and Chanel as the two people on the outs, and then since Tori became safe, it shifted over to Chanel, which she would then go on to be safe as well. But it shifted towards Chanel, and they were being really awkward about it. Like the first time, they were all in that big group talking about the 8 they were forming, and then she came up, and then they awkwardly all like pittered off, went off to do their thing. I'm going to go fish. I'm going to go over here. And tried to play it off very poorly. And then the second time, they're like, all right, this time we're going to try to stay here and make her feel more comfortable. So Hai was just like, yeah, we were just talking about what Rockroy is up to with all that. And these guys do really like you. And I love that they left us in. There was just a long break of awkward silence. And then they just had the exact same reaction where it was like, oh, well, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do that. They played it off just as poorly that time. So Janelle, like, it was no mystery to even Chanel that she was on the outs the whole time. So, I mean, if this alliance is solid now that Lydia's gone, who knows? But if it is, then it'll be more certain, and like you don't even really need to bother with Chanel. But obviously, it's important to always leave your options open because these things can change any given day. But I love a lot of people in this alliance. I would like to see them stick it out. And I'd especially just love to see Mike and Jonathan. They're probably my two favorites right now. I'd love to see them go far. So I love Omar as well, for sure. I'm going to give Omar credit for that. Like people like Omar and Hai, who bring a lot of strategic fun to the season as well. A lot of fun characters here to enjoy. Romeo was talking about how he's power hungry, and he really wanted Jonathan gone. Romeo I've liked, but obviously power hungry is not a good position you want to find yourself in at the merge of Survivor, where he's literally not being shy about it. He just wants the power, just to have the power. And he is obviously on the outs now, in the minority compared to where everybody else is at. And obviously I wasn't a huge fan of he was going for Jonathan because he's the tough guy. He's like, I get it. You're one of the outcast types there. You're not one of the athletic build people, so you want to be against that. But I don't know. I'm rooting for Jonathan, so I didn't like to see that. But I get it. And so ultimately, Hai, Mike, Lindsay, Jonathan, Drea, and Marianne all vote for Lydia. And I mean, it would have been Omar too. So that's that 7-person alliance. Now minus Lydia, she could have been a part of it, but she turned her back on it that quick. And then Romeo and Lydia voted for Marianne, and Chanel and Tori voted for Jonathan. Roxroy voted for Lindsay, which is still a wild card option out of nowhere. That still confuses me. I'm not sure we'll get a clear answer on that or not anytime soon, but it seems like they had gotten everybody convinced that they were going to be on board with them. Since there was 2 and 2 on Marianne and Jonathan, they were probably going for a split thing, but meanwhile everybody was on board against Lydia with the secret alliance here. So yeah, I'm excited. This was a very fun, exciting episode. I'm excited to see what direction the season will go in. And now, will Roxroy be the winner after the hourglass twist? I find that hard to believe, but that would be amazing if there was a 100% win rate from the hourglass twist to the end. But yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more. Go to the links in the description for social media, and if you want to leave any feedback for us, check us out. Every week we're going to be doing Survivor Guatemala along with me talking about Survivor 42. Okay, and if you enjoyed this video, go check out our discussion. Go check out our review of Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, the film about Ted Bundy on Netflix. Ted Bundy played by Zac Efron, of course. Check that out. All right, take care.